Jodi-Ann Burey is a writer, critic, and sought-after speaker on race, culture, and health equity. Her essays appear in various arts, business, and literary publications. Inspired by her personal journey and professional experience in public health, Jodi-Ann is also the creator and host of Black Cancer, a podcast about the lives of people of color through their cancer journeys. In partnership with One Kin, Jodi-Ann is the co-creator and host of Lit Lounge, a curated book collection and author interview series, and the creator and host of Lit Lounge, The People's Art, a monthly prose and poetry salon. She was born in St. Catherine, Jamaica, lives in Seattle, Washington, and will always call New York City her home. Sonora Jaw is the author of 4 books, most recently the novel The Laughter, which won the 2024 Washington State Book Award, was longlisted for the Aspen Awards Literary Prize, and was named one of the best books of 2023 by The New Yorker, NPR, and others. Her previous books are the memoir How to Raise a Feminist Son and the novel Foreign. Her latest novel, Intemperance, will be out from Harper Via on October 14th. Dr. Jaw is a Loyola endowed professor at Seattle University. And I'd be amiss not to mention that Sonora will be at Elliott Bay, on October 14th for the launch of Intemperance, so you can come celebrate her and her wonderful new book with us. In Authentic, Burey delves into the dangers of disclosure in environments that aren't built for our well-being. Companies that once encouraged employees to come as you are and bring your full authentic self to work are now shutting down initiatives, part of an ongoing cycle of trading on our identities when it's inconvenient and profitable. Authentic is a bold call and powerful reckoning to reclaim agency at work and beyond. We are so lucky to have the author of Authentic here with us tonight, so please join me in welcoming Jodi-Ann and Sonora.
Yeah? Oh my God. I'm gagged. My cousin is here from New York. Oh my gosh, Kim and Noble. Okay, wait. I did not know you were coming. Aww. My 2 cousins are here that live on the East Coast. Hi, Kim. Hi, Noble. I didn't know you were going to be here. You're so sneaky. You're so sneaky. She texted me like an hour ago, hey boo, what are you doing? Okay.
Your cousins are sneaky? It's so hard to believe. Is my mic working as well? Okay, yeah. Great. Okay, here we are. Take this in, Jodi-Ann. This is amazing. Crazy. And congratulations on this incredible book, on this incredible evening for you. So, Authentic is deeply researched. It was a pleasure to read. It's so deeply researched, it's widely interviewed, and at the same time it manages to be so intimate and so vulnerable. And I was telling you, like when I read it, and I called you and I said, it's a literary call to action. It's full of beautiful prose, and it inspires you, and you want to do something about things. So I'll ask you to read a section that is very moving.
Thank you. I'm just, Navla and Kim, I just can't believe y'all. This is so crazy.
Do you need some more time?
No, I'm just, thank you so much. I have like, what do we have, like 100 something cousins? You know, and just to see my family here after I've lived in Seattle for 10 years now. And I don't get a lot of family out here, but Navlet comes so much because she's a flight attendant, so she flies out here, and it's just so lovely to see you and Kim. I can't believe this is happening. But okay, focus. So I'll read from the first chapter of the book. It's called The Call. Am I dying or what? I said to Dr. Singh the moment he entered the exam room. Dr. Singh had been my physiatrist for 2 years. We had long passed typical doctor-patient niceties. My physical therapist referred me to Dr. Singh after months of exercises, stretches, acupuncture, and ointments had failed to treat my chronic pain. She said I had a difficult case. That word, difficult. a common pejorative wielded against Black women who advocate for ourselves, made it hard to hear a difficult case and not difficult patient or difficult person. I was apprehensive at first, worried she just wanted to hand me off to another doctor who told me nothing was wrong. But Dr. Singh was attentive and respected me as an equal partner in my care. That his office called so soon after I left the imaging center didn't surprise me. I ignored it anyway. The whole point of scheduling an MRI during my lunch break was to distract myself with work. I wanted to delay the frustration of yet another diagnostic dead end. My phone rang again and again. 3 missed calls in a row made it clear today was not a day for distraction. 3 missed calls plus an email asking me to come to the clinic veiled Dr. Singh's urgency thinner than a hospital gown. Doctors do not summon patients for nothing. I left work early. I rushed to his office. I hugged my stomach, trusting my gut comforted me. It settled best without any sugar on the truth. "You're not dying," Dr. Singh replied. "But you do have a tumor inside your spinal cord." Dr. Singh continued saying something about my cervical vertebrae, something paralyzed, something quadriplegia, something, "I'll be there with you every step of the way." His voice drifted. My mind left my body. I laughed, but Dr. Singh didn't hear me. Did Dr. Singh hear me? He pulled up my scans on his computer. I smiled as he traced the bulging oblong blob of gray inside my neck, the thinning tissues down my spine. A tumor, shaped like a boiled dumpling. The ones my mother cooked with rice and stew peas, my mother. How do I tell my mother? How do I tell her a dumpling is hurting my body? Which of the 78 medical descriptors for pain captured the 3 years it took to get diagnosed? Could any express the unnerving combination of relief in knowing and the fear knowing caused? Which words describe how much it hurt me to be so difficult, just so doctors would take me seriously? Heavy, cruel, unbearable, wrenching, numb, terrifying, tender, exhausting. That's it. I felt exhausted. Something about a surgery consultation with a Dr. So-and-so in the morning brought me back to my body. Dr. Singh's presumption about my availability irked me. I wanted to tell him about all my project meetings in the morning, my business trips to Malawi and Belgium the following week. I wanted to brag that I had already booked a getaway to snowboard in Chamonix and how cool it was that I could do all this when my Jamaican mother grew up walking barefooted to school, allegedly. Nothing spells American dream like a weekend frolicking in the French Alps. But I did not mention any of this once I realized Dr. Singh never left the exam room. He had scheduled with Dr. So-and-so before I arrived. No referral slips, no wait lists for the next available appointment. Nothing but this tumor mattered now. A hoarse whisper chiseled the dam in my throat. "There is a tumor inside my spinal cord," I echoed, and let the hurt break free. Crises have a way of metastasizing our identities. mention cancer and people speak in this sentimental Hallmark card coo that sounds like they're telling secrets to a baby. Grief, however premature, weighted every conversation I had. So I named my tumor Ted. A bit of tumor humor to lighten the dread-soaked air suffocating everyone around me. How are you feeling about Ted today? Any Ted updates? Ted is an asshole. We need to get Ted out of your life. Friends and colleagues treated Ted like a toxic relationship they were begging me to leave. The more they talked about Ted, the more consciously we uncoupled. I was not the crisis. I was just in a crisis. I was not difficult. Ted was. I chose the name Ted because it evoked passive-aggressive white guy energy. You know the type. The one at work who compliments your hair only to cite it as proof you lack executive presence and undermines your promotion. Ted is the guy who volunteers you to take the meeting notes for a project you lead. When you call out your company's failure to hire more people of color, Ted says you're being difficult because don't you know these things take time? Ted is the guy who threatens to fire you and sometimes does when you disagree. Ted's grate the nerves, a fitting metaphor for actual nerve damage. I was a Black woman with a spinal cord injury. Between the tumor and daily exposure to racialized occupational violence, my back was breaking.
So you see what I mean about beautiful prose and vulnerable, just beautifully done. Talk a little bit about the genesis of this book. And I know you did a TED Talk, not to be confused with this TED.
Yeah. That was not the plan, by the way.
Tell us how this came about and how long have you been thinking about this?
Yeah, so it actually started in 2019. It started in 2018 from this scene. I was diagnosed with a spinal cord tumor in 2018. And so when you're being treated in a cancer hospital, when you're going through a major health crisis, you're constantly dealing with people just throwing all these cliches and platitudes at you. Just take it one day at a time. You can beat this. You're a fighter. You're a warrior. And I just remember being in the hospital and just hearing all of that. I'm like, do you know how long a day is when you are in constant pain? Do you know how long a day is when you can't even get out of bed unless someone can come and help you get out of bed, to go to the bathroom, to do anything? And so I became very sensitive to platitudes. And so after I came back, I returned to work after 4 months of disability leave. I just couldn't be in my life anymore. And so I quit that job and ended up at a women's co-working space startup. And it was just like very high pressure. It allowed me to just work, and not really cope with the post-traumatic stress that I was dealing with after my surgery and recovery process. And so this is like the hashtag girl boss era. Everybody, a lot of platitudes, okay? And I was just like, imposter syndrome, be authentic, come as you are. And I was like, bullshit. And so I started thinking through, okay, if you do think that this is bullshit, why do you think that this is bullshit? And started crafting kind of these talking points. And so I ended up giving a seminar at the University of Washington about the topic. I gave a couple of keynotes on it. And so by the time TED came around, I'm like, well, I've been talking about this for like a year now, so maybe this is my, idea worth sharing. And so that got me to TED, which then led to the book. But everything that I do you know, I have a public health background, and so having a public health background plus going through a major health crisis, the foundation of everything that I do is for the health and well-being of myself and the people in my community.
Yeah, and that's something that's so true about big, profound books like this, right? That you've been preparing to write it for a long time before you even start thinking of writing a book, right? So you can tell because there's a lot of depth and backstory and really good, rich material in here. So, one of which is this thing, and we've talked about this sometimes, and you know, there's several people in the audience who will probably relate to it, that companies that rank high in the best places to work list are usually not the best places for Black or disabled people.
Yeah.
In fact, the call to be authentic undeservedly disadvantages people of color. And that really hit me. And you know, we know this, but to see it written in cold hard print is another thing. So speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, even to that point, when I would talk about this or I would ask people, oh, have you ever heard the phrase, bring your full authentic self to work? Anytime I was talking to a person of color, they just roll their eyes. And so my goal with the book was to try to translate that eye roll, that like physical language, into verbal language, right? Into written text. And so that's hard because one thing I love about Black women, that eye roll, that's like the encyclopedia, right? Of what we could mean with that. And so I was very generous in like trying to keep it short of what an eye roll can mean. But I don't know if I intended this to be the case because so much of my professional life, you know, 2018 was eight years ago, almost 8 years. I'm coming up on the 8-year anniversary. And so much of my professional life has been shaped by being a Black person in the workplace. And so for the past 8 years, what it means to then also be disabled just opened just the analysis of like how institutions function, the ways that they lie to you. And even when you think that, hey, I have an actual tangible need, right? You're thinking that maybe this disability thing would kind of give me something that, you know, being Black, being a woman just doesn't. And it was just really difficult to see the ways in which when I first came back from surgery, I used a cane intermittently for about 2 years. And so my work experiences were, you know, it's great when you have a visible cue, right? A visual reminder for other people that you need help. But once those identities become invisible, then it's harder to navigate these workplaces as a disabled person. And then also when you're a Black woman, if I'm in pain, if I'm late, if I'm kind of slouched back, you're not engaged, you got an attitude, you don't want to be here, why are you so angry? And so it's forcing a disclosure that maybe I don't want to talk about. And so in writing the book, you know, I am a whole person, regardless of where I work. And so if I'm going to call a book authentic, then I need to bring the whole of me to the page. And so, you know, I read on Instagram today that someone called this like a disability justice memoir, you know, using that kind of language. And it means so much for that to be seen in a way that, in a lot of ways, me being a disabled person isn't as visible.
And I just realized too that it may become more invisible as disability is one of the words that when you're applying for these grants, right, that they've canceled now, there's all these checklists of words that if they see that, then they just say no to giving you money for your research. Disability is one of them. It's like, oh my goodness, where do we go? Okay. So in terms of care, right, like caring for ourselves in this kind of a situation, you say caring for our health and well-being is not about optimizing ourselves for labor, but for living. I mean, the book is full of just like incredible sentences such as these, right? Not for labor, but for living. And that is so difficult to do in this capitalist, you know, times and capitalist country and, I mean, everywhere. And you were talking about the girl boss thing too, like we're supposed to live into that and lean in there. And it's like, oh my God, I'm so tired.
Yeah, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, our time is our time. And it's really hard to negotiate that when you live in capitalism, right? I went to a book event at Mom's Books, actually, and Angela Garbs, a local author, she said that work is a coercive element of our survival. Most people have to work. And so there's this way that we're being abused in a system that we depend on. That's how we take care of ourselves. That's how we take care of our families. That's how we live a life. That's how we have health insurance, which I think is just such an immoral way of designing society. If you want to be well, you have to work, but work will not allow you to be well. There's another sentence in there where I say that capitalism demands malignant productivity. It's the more that we deny our health and well-being, our society rewards us for that. But, I see so much of authentic as being almost a public health intervention, because I don't want getting a call from your doctor, the unexpected call, the call that no one wants to get. I don't want other people to get that, and that's when they decide that, well, maybe the ways that I think about success and status aren't serving me. Maybe it's okay not to get the second, third, fourth promotion. Maybe it's okay to go part-time. Maybe I don't need 5 cars. I mean, that's a little exaggerating. But I don't know, with Seattle, some of y'all might have 5 cars, right? Maybe I don't need 2 cars, right? Like, maybe there's a different way of being where I can be in community with other people. I can think of different models for my survival that just doesn't depend on us having everything and hoarding everything as a way to live, which is that cycle of malignant productivity.
Wow, that's amazing. That's beautiful. I want to shift gears to a craft question.
Yes, I love this.
If there are writers here, you would want to hear this.
Black Women Write Seattle, raise up.
Yay! What is the structure of the book? How did you decide on how to structure the book? And I know this is difficult because most of the time we're just writing and we don't know where the heck we're going.
That's a fact. Well, here, I'll tell you what the ending structure is. The beginning structure was chaotic as all hell, because I was like, I'm an author now, so I'm gonna write super long chapters. And I was like, I'm gonna have 6 chapters in the book, and that's a book, And it was not working. It was not working at all. So those 6 chapters became sections. And so then those sections, I think there's maybe 22 or 23 chapters in the book. And so each of those sections is examining authenticity through a different lens. What I was thinking is, okay, what does authenticity mean? How is the narrative functioning within the workplace? And then it became these headers of, okay, authenticity as care. How do we think about ourselves and our bodies? Our bodies are the most fundamental part of being human. So let's start with our health and well-being. Authenticity as myth. Let's talk about the different narratives of how Bring Your Full Authentic Self operates, how does Come As You Are operate, what are some of the fallacies within that, what are ways that those types of narratives, I say it's kind of like being on a treadmill, right? We're working so hard to prove ourselves, to be our full selves, but it's kind of like being in a treadmill, right? You're just exhausted and you're in the same place, right? Institutions know this. Right? They kind of pass and scapegoat. Well, you be more of yourself. That's how we will change. And it doesn't work like that, right? And so that authenticity is myth is examining that. Spectacle is just me pushing back on representation, thinking about reasonable accommodations, pushing back against that, the way that we treat disabled people within the workplace. Then we have purpose, because I find that, and I've even seen people talk about the book publicly where they say, oh, Jodi-Ann comes from a corporate background. I really don't. Most of my career has been in nonprofits, right? And so there's a whole section literally just on nonprofits and the ways that, to me, nonprofits are even more insidious than for-profit sector, because what they are attacking is our value system. So there's a way that nonprofits can corrupt our sense of mission. And so instead of just turning away from this particular organization, a lot of people turn away from the sector. They turn away from it completely. There's a quotation in there that I love, and I'm like, I have to include this, where I just chatted with a couple of people on LinkedIn, and they were sharing their stories working in nonprofits and how awful it's been, and sometimes even worse than being in the for-profit sector. And this one respondent said that she said that she left tech because she wanted to, follow mission. She wanted to do good work in the world. And then she's working at this nonprofit, and she said that they were treating her like shit at a discount. So she went back to tech, right? It's like, so you corrupt us against the mission completely. And that to me feels like a deeper betrayal.
You call it corrosive.
Corrosive, it's corrosive, yeah. And so then the last two sections, I mean, even writing the book, I was really fighting a lot of cynicism. And so I was trying to find a way out of just the muck. And so, okay, what about the refusal? What about our power of no? That is also part of who we are, the things that we say no to. And then the last section is about authenticity as agency, and what does agency really look like. And so the last two pieces that bookend the book is the prologue and the epilogue. I will say this, when I was an early reader, I'm like, I'm not reading the prologue, whatever, I just want to get to the actual book. No, that's not how you read books, baby. I went back to some old books, and I'm like, oh, you missed all of that by skipping the prologue and the introduction? No. So please read the prologue. I worked very hard on it. But the book is bookended by the lead up to the 2020 election. So there's some pandemic stuff, hold your heart as you go into that. And then it ends with the lead up to the 2024 election. And so it's hard to end the book on a positive note when you end it that way, but it's not trying to be a hopeful book. I just wanted to be realistic about where to put our attention and how to think about our time.
That's great. So not only do you not come from a corporate background, you come from a very rich and varied background, right? You have so many stories in here that are so global and come from different cultures. And I think one of them is from the Jamaican background. It's, is it Haig?
Yeah, Old
right?
Haig.
Old Haig,
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that story? She eats children or something?
Yes.
Tell us a bit of that story and how you brought in some of these stories into yours.
Yeah, so when I decided that I would title the TED Talk and title the book and use myth, I wanted to think about myth and Jamaican folklore, and so much of the book is about recovering my own sense of self. And so I was like, well, are there any Jamaican myths that maybe I don't know, or maybe things that I do know but I don't know the names of it? Maybe there are practices that are in my family that I don't know the origin of those types of practices. And so as I was going through and looking specifically for Jamaican folklore, I found this myth of Old Haig. It's not just Jamaican, it's very popular among the Caribbean, and I wouldn't be surprised if some parts of Africa as well, just thinking about, transatlantic slave trade. But the myth is that there's this old, haggardly woman who has a human form by day, and then at night, she either becomes a fireball, which I think that's the Guyanese interpretation, and then the Jamaicans is that she turns into an owl and kind of goes across the village and sucks the blood and breath out of babies. And then, when she's done feasting on the next generation, that is authentic.
For sure, yeah.
Then she puts on her skin again and returns to human form. So I just found that really interesting about the skins that we put on, the skins that we shed. And, I also wanted to push back against the myth as well, because, that's in the book and reinterpreting it as, I don't really trust myths about women, because they normally cast women as witches and sorcerers and all of this. And so the way I like to interpret it is that she's just shedding the skin like a heavy coat. And as she's boasting, you know, there's a way that maybe she's showing people what a free woman looks like. And maybe we're warning babies against that because, you know, as I was saying in the book, a free woman is a dangerous contagion. When one of us is free, you know, our whole circle gets a little bit more free. And so that to me felt more resonant. But then I did learn in asking my mom and our Wilson family chat, asking, hey, does anyone know anything about Ojai? You know, did Mama, our grandmother, did she keep Bibles open? That's the thing. If you want to protect your babies, you keep a Bible open where they sleep. And so Auntie Cynthia is like, yeah, Mama did that. And just seeing that practice or the myth of that practice in our family just made me feel a little bit more connected to the folklore.
That's lovely. It's also a great invitation for all of us to examine our myths and see like what kind of crap was being dealt to women characters, right, in these myths that were being written by men mostly.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. You also, like moving from myth to like pop culture, you do it so fluidly. I really enjoyed, and we talked about about Insecure. We both love that show.
Yeah.
Remember Insecure, which was so incredible?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. You talk about that section where Lawrence is on the couch, and I love one line from that where you talk about how he's wearing a Stanford sweatshirt.
Georgetown.
Oh, Georgetown. Oh, yeah. And you say the shirts are always more comfortable than the places, than the institutions. It's so funny. Yeah, talk a little bit about Insecure and how you used it in the book.
Yeah, I wanted to bring Insecure in because I feel like it was the living single of my, I don't want to say generation, because I feel like living single is forever, you know. Yes. But I started rewatching Living Single recently. Oh no, should not have been watching that. I didn't know what was happening for real, you know? But I felt like Insecure and all the characters' professional development was aligning a little bit with mine. And so I wanted to go through each character and kind of see their arc and if there were any lessons in this fictional world that aligned with the people in my community. So we have like the fictional characters connected with people that I actually know, along with my own journey, my professional journey. So that section is weaved in that way. But Lawrence on the couch, first of all, I'm not Team Lawrence. I really wish that Insecure ended with Issa just being on her own, but whatever. But I felt so much compassion for him because we see him, he's in this like really tattered Georgetown shirt, his, you know, jawline, his whole hair shape up situation, just like a little bit of a hot mess. And so I took a screenshot of that clip with the way his hair looked, and I texted it to some of my guy friends. And I'm like, all right, what do you think about this? What is this like shape up telling you? And they were like, yep, no, if he was going to a job interview looking like that, he was not trying to get that job. Like, there's no way that you would leave the house looking like that. And so I'm like, wait, I think he's depressed. And why wouldn't he be? You know, that chapter is called What Do You Do with a Broken Promise, is the preceding chapter leading up to the Insecure bit. And I just felt like he was told the same thing I was told, right? I graduated in 2008, not such a great time to enter the workforce. You know, those characters also graduated from these elite universities around that time. And so they said, you work really hard, you go to a fancy school, you will get that fancy career, and you're gonna get a fancy life. And that did not happen. What else would he do? You know, it kind of destroyed him a little bit, his whole sense of self. And so I just felt so much compassion for him, and I think in feeling compassion for Lawrence, I felt compassion for myself in the ways that my career didn't start off the way that I wanted to. Everyone's out here clowning Lawrence for working at Best Buy. I spent 2 years working full-time as a personal trainer, and in the beginning it was cool, and then it wasn't. When I felt like my clients were living the type of life that I wanted to live. And this wasn't what was supposed to happen to me. right? And yes, I believe that all work is dignified and it's all good work. And so I'm having that internal struggle with myself. Why do you feel ashamed of this work? You're still doing great work. And so I was just so torn. And so I think watching Lawrence's journey helped me kind of forgive some of the ideas that I had about, what it means to be a professional and to have a good job, and kind of unlearn those things. Because the reality is I made way more money as a personal trainer than I did when I was working in charter schools. I made my own schedule. I only worked with people that I liked. And had I not had the experience in my 20s doing wage work, I would not have the skills that I have today to be an entrepreneur. I could not be here if I wasn't working as a personal trainer for those 2 years. So anyway, pop culture was just a way for me to examine my own life and to have more grace. If we're going to have more grace for Lawrence, I had to have more grace for myself.
That's beautiful. That's incredible. Thank you. In having more grace for ourselves, and also going through the ins and outs of discovering, which job feels, where can we actually bring ourselves, our whole selves to work, we then encounter the spectacle, right? We then encounter the place that says, oh, be yourself. We totally love you just the way you are, right? And so and at no level, right, whether you're a fitness trainer or you're working wages, at no point does that really end, right? And you have to have a ton of agency to recast it and reframe it, as you say in the book. Talk about how that kind of follows even big stars, like you've talked about Serena Williams. Talk a little bit about that phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, who here doesn't love Serena Williams? I think in writing this, I realized how much I attached my own sense of self to her. Her win was my win. Attacks against her were attacks against me. We always have this thing where we say, like, that happened to Serena Williams. That's happening to all of us. Like, we tie our stories. Serena Williams almost died during childbirth. They didn't even listen to Serena Williams. Why would they listen to us? So there's this way that we think of ourselves, through what happens to celebrities. And like Serena Williams is just like such a prominent case for this. And so when she narrated this commercial called, this was in 2019, back when I was doing the girl boss stuff. I was paying more attention to narratives about women. So Nike had this commercial called Dream Crazier. And so it was all about, like, they have a similar one now called If You Can't Win, Then Win. Have y'all seen this commercial? So in 2019, the tagline was like, if they call you crazy, then show them what crazy can do, and she's talking about her own story and talking about all these accomplishments of women and girls in sports. And I'm like, every time I watch this commercial, I'm like crying, because I'm like, Serena, And then a couple of months after that, a long distance runner, a world championship runner, Alicia Montano, she came out with her New York Times op-ed, and her campaign was called #DreamMaternity. And she talked about, and she used the same kind of language of that commercial, and talked about the ways that Nike, who she was a sponsored athlete for Nike, and the Olympic Committee, if you were pregnant or postpartum, if you were not actively running, you did not have health insurance. You didn't have it. And so, these people are not on teams, they're not a part of, their relationships are with sponsors. And so if you are not running, they have nothing to sponsor, right? And so she's advocating she became known as the pregnant runner because she was racing when she was 6 months pregnant, then 8 months pregnant, and it became this big spectacle of oh my gosh, look at her, she's running, she's the pregnant runner. And she's like, yeah, I didn't have health insurance. And really talking about the policies that allow that type of representation to be possible, right? Serena Williams having a baby and coming back to the sport, they're covering their own healthcare. And so Allison Felix, who's one of the most decorated Olympians, she also came out with her own story. And then within the time that I was working on the book, there was an athlete who was on, I think it was like Tori Bowie, I think her name was, Frentorish. She was on the relay team with Allison Felix, and she had passed away. I think she was 8 months pregnant at the time. So then another relay player, she tweeted out that as of today, 3 out of the 4 women on the relay team that won the gold medal have either died or almost died from childbirth. And so what I'm interrogating in that chapter is the way that the Serena of it all, I don't want to do the analysis, right? I don't want to look at that, because with Serena, I can feel so seen. I don't want to look. I don't want to look at the analysis. I don't, right? I want to feel represented. But there's a way that seduction of representation causes us to shut down. We close our eyes. We don't pay attention to the ways that underneath that spectacle we're being harmed. And so I remember listening to a interview with Ava DuVernay, and the interviewer was kind of pushing her, like, it's getting better, right? It's getting better for Black women and other people of color, directors in the industry. And she was like, I mean, a few good things happen to a few people. Look at the movie Coda. Those actors have not worked. Look at Orange is the New Black. Who has more careers since that? And so these wins, this representation, it feels so good. And it does so little for our material lives at work. Yeah.
So as you were doing all this research and it was feeling probably, you were learning a lot as you were going, you knew a lot, and then writing, and it was exhausting, right?
Firsthand, because I called you crying many times.
I was like, Jodi, okay, I better. But it was also so educational for me, so thank you for those phone calls. What did you learn about yourself? And also, okay, let's make it a little more fun.
Okay.
One more fun question. What did you do for fun, and how did you take care of yourself?
Okay, I love this question. Okay. People in Black Women Write Seattle, you've heard me say this, that there's so much of writing that does not actually involve sitting down and writing. And so one thing I promised myself after I got the deal, and you told me to take a process journal to write about my process. And so very early on, I promised myself that my physical, mental, and emotional health would not take the back seat to the book. And so I love snowboarding. It's like a thing that I really enjoy doing. And I would not allow the book to take away from my snowboarding schedule. So I often say snowboarding is writing. And let me tell you, those snowboarding trips, I would go every week on a Wednesday, because ain't nobody up there. And the time, that drive, that hour and a half, I'm not on my phone. My mind is wandering. I'm like in my body. I'm writing sentences in my head. I'm thinking through arguments. I'm going down the slopes, up and down all day, just like being away from my phone and being in my own mind, just like the stillness of the mountain, and just like having that like clearness physically, like clear space, but also clearness in my mind, allowed me to push through so many different arguments in the book that I was getting really stuck, and just giving myself that time. And so there are so many ways that I see all of these ways that I can take care of myself, where I can be in community with other people. That is also writing. That is also working on the book. So that's one way I took care of myself for sure. And then also I found different parts of the book where I could be with other people. And so I would always go to coffee shops. I would always try to do co-working with other people when I was just doing brainstorming, when I'm just talking to myself and it's just kind of going, and I needed to be in spaces with other people to remind myself that there's more that's going on in life than you and the page. And so that freed my mind up a little bit too. So that kept me sane as much as possible. There were some dicey moments, you know.
Yes.
Can I
Here
tell
we
the
are.
story very quickly?
You want to tell a story? Let us tell a story. Yeah,
very
go ahead.
quickly.
Yeah.
We're on this writing thing on some island in Canada. And everyone's like, oh yeah, let's go out into the water. One of the guys in the group had a boat, of course, Albert, right?
Yes, that's right. That was his name.
And I was like, I'm not going on the boat. I gotta work through this argument. I can't do it. Da-da. And then Sonora's like, come on the boat with us. Let's do it. And I'm like, I'm afraid to go into the water because I just want to go into the ocean and let the ancestors take me. And then Sonora looks at me and she's like, do I need to put you on suicide watch? I was like, oh wait, I'm getting a little out of my mind. So I ended up going on the trip and it was wonderful.
It was lovely.
Yeah,
It was so good.
Yeah.
It was nice to see you far away, but like through the corner of my eye, watching you on the stand-up paddle.
Oh yeah, I let the ocean take me.
I saw that.
Okay.
Yes. We were all watching. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's so nice to picture you on the snowboarding slopes and everything too.
Yeah.
So I'm being told that it's time for audience questions. So I know people have questions. We will take some audience questions.
And we'll bring a mic to you if you want to raise your hand. We have one here in the front row.
Do not give Kemi a mic.
Hi, girl.
Hey girl, hey.
I would like to ask you a question about like timeline. Like you wrote the book in a particular era where you're thinking about your relationship to work and Black women's relationships to work, thinking about concepts of authenticity in a particular time period. What does it feel like to have the book come out in an era when the corporate state, the nonprofit state is capitulating to the fascist state, where the possibility of authenticity is the register upon which we're going to be policed, captured, deported, whatever it may be. And so thinking about these different kind of time periods of the production of the book and the output of the book, like how are you, I'm wondering if your relationship to the content actually maybe has changed and your relationship to how you would like people to receive the book has changed.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question because that was a major concern of mine. And when I started writing the book in 2022, we were kind of way past the end of the racial reckoning, you know? And so it's kind of speaking to that, but also noticing that there are these cycles that always happen. A friend of mine, she did the podcast, The Nod, or for Colored Nerds. They did two podcasts, and for Colored Nerds, they had this game where they would say, is it good or bad for the Blacks, right? And so they would have these debates in pop culture, is this good or bad for Blacks? So actually Lawrence was one of the topics. Like, is Lawrence Walker good or bad for Black people, right? It was like a little silly. But that framework of like good for the Blacks, bad for the Blacks, and like, okay, 2021, 2022, in some circles, like, all right, we're looking for a lot of Black people. Black people are getting jobs. A lot of Black people are getting opportunities. There are these ways that corporations are trying to, meaningfully address a lot of the occupational violence and racial discrimination within the workplace. But every single Black person I knew that window was going to close. And then at some point we might be up again. And so in the very beginning, I was writing to the cycle, this kind of boom and bust of our interest in, diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever we call it in whatever era. It goes down, and there's a sense that has that cyclical nature of it, that these institutions will trade on our identities when it is convenient and when it is profitable. So as that kept going, and then, what was happening with Trump, I talk about Trump in the book, but I never mention his name. He's only referred to as the president who wanted us to inject our bodies with sunlight and bleach. It's the only way he's referenced. So as I was seeing what was going on with the 2024 election, and then now I'm in revisions, the book is typeset, and we're seeing the ways that, you know, the material realities of this DEI thing is changing so quickly. My team threatened me with fines. I'm only here so I don't get fined, right? Like, for all the changes that I was making, because I wanted to put in these little points throughout the book so the reader knows that I know that this shift had happened. But once I read through the whole book, the argument never changed. I was always speaking to this era, which would not have existed in the same way if Kamala Harris had won, but we would be back in that representation game. So the book would still speak to that. I think it made it a little bit more nerve-wracking that the book would, in critiquing DEI, would be used against me in some type of way, that bad actors could use it to defend the thing that I'm arguing, you know? So I was a little anxious about that, but once you write a book, it doesn't belong to you, so people will interpret it however you want, if that answers your question, yeah.
We have another question here, and then we'll bring a mic to you next.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for being here.
Thank you for being here.
I do think for your consideration to write to Issa Rae about having a reverent cartoon about this Ted who's a dumpling. I don't know. It just occurred to me. That's not my question.
Okay, great. Noted.
It's interesting because I find that authenticity is kind of like a moving target. And much like there's this kind of decolonizing of the mind, what we knew as our true selves is actually something that we didn't discover for ourselves, especially as women and women of color. So I'm curious how you kind of set out to define authenticity before you started writing it, so you could tether yourself to what that means.
Yeah.
So.
I love that desire for tethering because I felt that as well. But the reality is that authenticity is incredibly nebulous. I think for me, it's hard to define myself fully within a vacuum of the institutions. And so I was just saying to my friend Jasmine earlier today, like, I love that I'm so assertive. I love that. I love that I'm opinionated. I love that I'm contrarian. That's Dr. Singh, everybody. He's a real person. If you're looking for a fantastic physiatrist, I do recommend Dr. Singh. What was I saying? Oh, I love these things about me, but it's also the thing that I've had to defend within institutions. I love being assertive, but everyone keeps telling me that I'm assertive and they want me to feel bad about that. So I'm like standing on it. Yeah, I am. And what? You know? So it's hard to even think of myself outside the ways that institutions kind of force me to think about who I am. And I think in writing the book and even pointing that out, I think the question of who are you is something that we should be asking ourselves every day. Because whoever I thought I was before my surgery, that person doesn't exist anymore. And so allowing that to be very mercurial, I think, is the most foundational part of who we are. And so when I looked up the etymology of authenticity, it comes from authentis, which means acting on one's own authority, right? That doesn't have to do with characteristics, personality traits. You know, me having an afro doesn't make me more authentic than if my hair was straight. Am I acting on my own authority? I think that's really at the core of what I'm trying to get at. These institutions certainly cannot define you if we ourselves are always going through the process of defining who we are.
Hey, Jodi-Ann.
Hey Mike. I did go to Chamonix, by the way.
Yeah, touche.
That's an inside joke.
Touche. All right. Question. I was really curious to know a little bit more detail about the ways that nonprofits were more insidious than corporations. And I was wondering if you could give like some specific examples.
Well, there are specific examples in the book.
There's what?
There are specific examples in the book.
By the book.
Read the
Yes,
book.
but I think the best way, I'll say this, the only anonymous quotation in the book that literally just says anonymous is someone who told me that they do not know a single Black woman who's left the Gates Foundation whole. And so let's use the Gates Foundation as an example. I feel comfortable using that example because I never worked there. I anonymized most of my professional history. A lot of my former coworkers are here, so y'all know who I'm talking about. But I'll use the Gates Foundation because when we think about Gates, like that's where global health work happens, right? They have the most money, they have the most resources, they have so many people in Seattle, all over the world. They have so much infrastructure to tackle some of the world's like most devastating health issues. But people who work there are dealing with bullshit every day. And so that can be corrosive because if the good work isn't happening here, then where does it happen? You know, a big part of my salary was paid for by the Gates Foundation. And so for a specific example, they had these grant cycles, $100,000. Who's supposed to do $100,000 in Malawi? Okay, fine. $100,000, do this 1-year tech program. So we rolled out a 1-year trial of something. It was an app where it was not stable. It was rushed because the funding cycles are so short. So you're rushing the development of an app. I'm going to another country where a big part of our initial training was to just teach these incredibly talented community health workers how to use a smartphone. What is an icon? What is this? And so it's an unstable app. They keep pushing software updates, but they can't manage like software updates constantly. It's so buggy. We're dealing in the rainy season. My colleagues in Malawi said you cannot roll out a tech program in the rainy season because you have to power these cell phones with solar panels and there's not enough sun. So we're supposed to be tracking these community health workers and their conversations and their patient education and all of these things, but how are we supposed to track that with a buggy app that can't get updated and the phone can't get charged? Cool. Gates is, money's running out. The funding cycle is about to be over. Program's kind of done, and I'm supposed to go to some conference, where was I? Belgium or something, presenting on what? And so I went up there, I talk about in the book, I went up there and I said, yeah, here's everything that went wrong. And everything that went wrong, my colleagues told me would go wrong. And the amount of people that came up to me after and they're like, this happens to our programs all the time, I don't believe you actually said it. So we see these glossy brochures, we're talking about all these health outcomes, like we're supposed to be doing all this good work all over the world, look at these babies, look at these pregnant women, and the people who actually work within those spaces know that that is not the reality for what's happening on the ground. How long can I do that and be lying to myself and other people about this good work that we're doing? It's damaging. And so I have friends here who invite me to these fundraisers and these galas, and I'm sitting here like, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Like, I can't even, I mean, the food's great, you know, especially in Seattle.
Is it though?
I mean, I'm not like a chef, you know, I don't enjoy cooking, so it's great to me, you know, plus the wine, right? And so, you know, I go to these things and I can't even fully participate because I'm just saying like, y'all are lying. And so I feel like it's hard, especially in Seattle, or when your work is so funded by philanthrocapitalism, that we become foot soldiers for these tech people trying to sanitize their reputations. Or, you know, buy whatever they need from the local government.
Or assuage guilt.
Assuage guilt.
Yeah.
I can't do that. And then also not be able to like, Joshua's here. When I left nonprofits, what is the first thing that I bought? A freaking mattress. I was like, yo, I'm about to have like a nice mattress because my salary just doubled. Right? So anyway.
We have a question up here.
Hi, Jodi-Ann.
Hey.
So to borrow sort of a concept from Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, I feel like the thought is that we're always becoming, and I'm thinking for your book, I was thinking through like how maybe your definition of authenticity changes as you change. So I was just kind of wondering from where you were as sort of like a little girl, what she thought maybe, what little Jodi-Ann thought was her authentic real self to now, how do you think that that's changed?
Wow, how has it changed? Is that more compelling than how it stayed the same? How it's changed, I wanted the briefcase, I wanted the pencil skirt, like I thought that that's what success looked like. You know, I wanted to be just like click-clacking down the hallway and just be like, yes, John, and you know, like all that kind of stuff. Like, I wanted to be an attorney, I wanted to be a doctor, I wanted those like important jobs. And I don't want that anymore. I don't use a job to define me. I always joke, I'm like, I've been unemployed for like 6 years, right? I've been writing this book, I've been trying to figure it out. And when I decided to work for myself, the first thing that I promised myself is I would not make decisions based on money. That was not always easy, but I wanted to prioritize my health and my well-being. And I think when you're just young, you don't think that way. You don't think you'll ever get the call. You think you'll live forever. And so I think for me, I care less about how people perceive my work, and I'm more invested in, do I feel good about myself today? That's right.
We have time for one final question up here at the top.
Hey,
Hey.
Peace. I'm Dominique. I am a nomad. I left Fort Lauderdale, Florida in March of 23, maybe 24, on an $85 flight to Colombia. And I went into the mountains for 30 days and hiked every day and prayed and listened to audiobooks and built a really deep relationship with Mother Earth. You know, it became like this nature-based healing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been on the move ever since. And I was so burnt out
Mm-hmm.
and realized that I was managing a lot of Black rage and Black fatigue. And I was pissed. After 2 master's degrees from the New School in Ohio State and working in 5 continents, I was constantly negotiating severances for these very toxic, violent environments that, similar to what you were saying, was asking me to reduce my light constantly. So in elementary school, middle school, high school, first generation, upward bound student, people are telling me like, hey, you can do whatever you want to do. Show up as yourself. And you get there and they're like, no, Black girl, you can't actually.
Yeah.
I'm blown away by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think he's just like the dopest writer ever. And like for me, I'm always thinking about the case for reparations because people think it's like, you know, a 400-year ago type of conversation. And it's like, no, like I've been treated like crap post-grad school. It's been 12 years, you know, of just fighting in the workplace. And that's cost me retirement. I've had to relocate, savings, like all the things, while like my colleagues continue to climb. So I guess my curiosity is the relationship between reparations now and this really deep racial component that I think sometimes gets pushed into a Black Lives Matter sticker on or a lawn sign with our NPR white liberal allies. But like, how can our allies who are non-Black support us in making sure that this cycle is interrupted and that it stops, and that Black children and brown children aren't graduating from college and going into these workplaces that just, they're awful, dude. Like, they're awful. You could be the smartest, coolest, most stylish person there, and that actually starts to work against you.
Yeah.
And it's isolating.
It is, and unhealthy. I think for that reason, and even hearing your story, and thank you so much for sharing that, and there's so many people who have experienced that, myself as well, I'm sure you as well. The word microaggressions is not in this book. It's occupational violence, right? This is structural violence, right? What they're stealing from us is our time of like healthful living. And there are ways that we can burn out that you cannot vacation out of, you cannot massage out of, you cannot PTO out of, the amount of physical damage this kind of occupational violence has in our lives. And so I think for me, to the question of allies and all of that, there is no mystery behind what institutions need to do. I personally believe we are very near saturation of ideas of how to have equitable and justice-focused workplaces. And what we've seen in the past couple of months is that once them political incentives change, they don't got no problem saying straight up deuces on all of that. And so personally, it's not my objective of the book, and it is not my objective in my work to tell white people how to be better. I think if I were to tweak that a little bit, I think we need to unlearn the expectation that information is the problem, right? Information is not enough to compel behavior change, right? That's like public health 101. Information isn't enough. And if people know better, they'll do better. That is also not true. 2020, they should have known a lot by 2020, but 2020, they learned a lot more, and look at where we are. So it's not my personal work to put my limited time and attention on telling people things that they already know. And so what I do hope is that for folks who think of themselves as allies, who think of themselves as co-conspirators in this work, you ain't gonna find no checklist in here of things to do because you already know, but I hope you can think with me in the book to have those conversations that don't really got nothing to do with me, and how you're gonna work on these institutions, because I'm trying to be as healthy as I can, and I want my people to be as healthy as they can.
That's amazing.
Thank you both so much. Thank you both. Let's give Sonora and Jodi-Ann one more big round of applause. And thank you so much. Ooh, we got standing ovation. Look at you. Yes. Well, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Jodi-Ann is going to sign at this table here. It's going to take us a minute to get the line set up, but those of you that want to get a book, get that from Elliott Bay there. Sonora has also said she's happy to stick around and sign, so you can get copies of Sonora's books from Mum's books there. And the line for Jodi-Ann will just go right straight across the auditorium here, and Sonora will be hanging around with a Sharpie. So come and say hi to both of them. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening.